Are the Minnesota Vikings Super Bowl contenders? Let's talk about it. What is going on, y'all? Faiz Sports, all back at it with another video talking, of course, NFL here to talk about the Minnesota Vikings, the kings of the NFC North this season, and whether or not they are for real and if they are legitimate championship Super Bowl contenders. Let's get into this right here, right now, folks. So the answer to the question of if the Minnesota Vikings are Super Bowl contenders to me is I think so. Now, I know that is not a very confident answer, but when you really break down the question, which is, are they a Super Bowl contender? The word contender means that they have the chance to potentially win the Super Bowl. And can I see a scenario where the Vikings can go on a run and win the Super Bowl? I can. Now, would I pick them to win the Super Bowl? I would not, but I can see that scenario. And that's why I'm saying I think so. Now, let's break this down a little bit deeper here. The Minnesota Vikings have a fantastic offense. It's elite. They have arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL in Justin Jefferson. Kirk Cousins is always solid. I've always said Kirk Cousins puts up numbers, and he's still underrated to me. A lot of people make fun of Kirk Cousins and write Kirk Cousins off and just think that he's not very good. I disagree. I think Kirk Cousins is solid. Solid as they come. They've got a top 5 potential running back in Dalvin Cook. They've got a great head coach in Kevin O'Connell. This team is solid. Now, where are their weaknesses? The defense. The defense is awful. 32nd overall in the NFL. Pass defense is literally the worst in football. You can certainly throw on the Vikings. And their rush defense around middle of the pack, or a little bit worse, 18th in the NFL. So defense is kind of where they lack here. And there are scenarios I see where if this happens, I don't see the Vikings making it far, which is if the Vikings have to play in a cold weather game, for instance, right? You got to go play in Philly in the playoffs, and we're talking about frigid temperatures, really cold, and it's easy for the Vikings to be good when you're playing in a domed environment in Minnesota, but when you got to go out in cold, I don't think Kirk Cousins is a very good cold weather quarterback. So that's a scenario where, it kind of hurts you. And the other scenario, too, is when you get physical with the Minnesota Vikings, they fold over and they just absolutely collapse. We've seen it when the Philadelphia Eagles early on in the season beat them down. We've seen it when the Dallas Cowboys beat them 40-3. Are you kidding me? Like, we have seen teams just obliterate the Vikings. So their high is really high, but their floor is really low as well. So that's the issue with the Vikings. But overall, if you want to just talk about the Vikings as a whole, this is an elite offense that can score and put up points on anybody, but also can't stop anybody consistently. And so that, to me, just not a great recipe in the playoffs. And for the Vikings, what they really need is when they get into the playoffs, they need to get lucky with the teams that they end up facing. Because if they're facing a team that's got, receivers that can beat the Vikings secondary deep, that's going to be a big problem, right? And with Kirk Cousins, we know he's not mobile. So if you get a team with a good pass rush, you can go ahead and get to Kirk Cousins and make life miserable for him. If you get a physical team, that's just not something that the Vikings are going to enjoy. So that's really what you have to look out for. But overall, I will give the Vikings their respect. They're very, very solid. Before the season, honestly, I should have just gone with my gut, which was to pick the Vikings to win the division. And I said, you know what? I just have to pick the Packers because they're Aaron Rodgers, back-to-back MVPs. Like, how can you not? But honestly, folks, I did not see this Packers team have the talent that the Vikings do, and they just don't. And I wanted to pick the Vikings, and I should have, and I didn't. But that's besides the point. The Minnesota Vikings are a Super Bowl contender. But would I pick them to win the Super Bowl? No, and they have to get lucky with the teams that they face. Otherwise, you can beat this Vikings team. And we've seen just recently Minnesota lose to Detroit, the more physical team. And that's another example of the Vikings losing. And I know they came back against the Colts, the largest comeback in NFL history. Shout out and credit to them. But it is the Indianapolis Colts and Matt Ryan. Not that impressive in that aspect, if you will, right? If they came back against, let's say, the Eagles or something like that, I would really, really give them more credit. But that was still impressive nonetheless. Overall, not trying to hate here, Minnesota Vikings, I think they are Super Bowl contenders, but I would not pick them to win the Super Bowl. Where are you guys at with the Vikings? Are they legit? Leave a comment down below as always. Thanks for watching.